Now, let me guess. You've got a list as long as your arm of ideas to grow your business. And I'm guessing some of those ideas will happen all in good time. But I'm also guessing some of those ideas may require more money than you currently have in order to bring them to life. That's where equity crowdfunding steps in. A pretty new industry that's growing by the minute, and who better to explain it to us than Australia's leading expert on the topic. It's a very equitable episode 588 of the 12-year-old award-winning Small Business Big Marketing podcast.
Well, I said, welcome to a small business marketing show, where successful small business owners share their souls to take your marketing straight to the lead. Now, here's your host, Mr. Tim Reid.
And welcome back to your weekly dose of Money Tree Marketing. I'm your host, Tim Reid, and I have an insatiable curiosity for uncovering marketing ideas that help businesses just like yours to grow. How do I do that? Excellent question. By having in-depth conversations with successful business founders from around this crazy world. You, infinitely more importantly, are a motivated business owner, and you're well and truly ready to crank out some great marketing to build that beautiful business of yours into the empire that it absolutely deserves to be. And that is exactly why this show exists. As per usual, team, there is marketing GOLD dripping from the ceiling over here at Small Business Big Marketing's HQ. So let's get stuck right in. Couple of updates. Thank you so much for the feedback again on last week's episode, how to use TikTok in 2022 to grow your business. If you're into bright, shiny objects, and I guess TikTok is one of them, then you will thoroughly enjoy that. And even just to kind of get an understanding of a new social media platform so you can show off to the kids, not a bad thing. Hey, my new website is live. Woohoo! Finally! Head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com and check it out. A big thank you to Greg Merrilees and his team at Studio One Design. Oh my God, OMG. Is it hashtag OMG? Easy to work with, those guys, so proactive in suggesting things and so focused on creating a great user experience, a great user interface, and creating a website that actually converts. I'm already selling more books. I wished I'd done it a long time ago. If you want to find out a little bit more about what Greg does, have a listen to episode 581 where he shares secrets of high converting websites, because he really is the master at it. And if you want to see where your website is holding back or underperforming, go to studioOneDesign.com/Timbo and you can do this free quiz that will uncover some of the stuff that you probably didn't want to know about. But, you know, if you fix it, your website will be infinitely better. I'm going to run a webinar with Greg in about 3 weeks' time. So if you're not on my list, head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com and sign up. It's a free webinar. Greg's going to review websites and it's going to be very, very, very handy. Again, a big thank you to the team at Studio One Design for my new website. I love episodes where I bring a new idea to your attention, and today is one of those episodes. I was introduced to Matt Vitale by Black Hops Brewery founder and recent guest Dan Norris, who'd recently raised $2 million in less than 24 hours using Birchal, Australia's leading equity crowdfunding platform. Matt, a commercial lawyer, is the co-founder of Birchal and is on a mission to help small businesses just like yours raise money in a way that you may not have previously considered, heard of, or understand. But it's probably time you did. The equity crowdfunding industry grew 79% in the past 12 months, with a total of $69 million raised to help businesses finance their future. Market leader Birchal contributed a whopping 77% of that growth. So if the idea of bringing in a few extra bucks or a lot of extra bucks to take your business to the next level is of interest, then you're going to love the insights Matt shares. He'll describe how equity crowdfunding works, who it's suited to, plus we'll go inside some successful and not so successful campaigns. Matt, welcome to the Small Business Big Marketing podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure, buddy. Now, what is equity crowdfunding and how does it differ from reward-based crowdfunding, which most of us know about?
Yeah, look, equity crowdfunding is essentially an offer of securities. In our case, shares in a company. It's similar to what we all know as crowdfunding in that it's done online and usually participated in by lots and lots of people. But in contrast to other forms of crowdfunding that most people will be familiar with, like Kickstarter and things like that, where you get something nominal in return, equity crowdfunding means you actually get a share in the business that you're backing. And that means a share of the upside, but all of the risks that come with running a small business as well.
What problem is equity crowdfunding solving then, Matt, for business owners that say commercial financiers or venture capitalists aren't?
Yeah, look, I mean, for so long, capital for early stage businesses has just not been available. When you think about large businesses and how they approach their capital needs, they have a funding mix, if you like, so a range of sources of capital that they'll employ to, suit their needs and what they're doing. Mm-hmm. Working with so many small businesses, we've seen what a lack of options results in. And a lot of founders, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners would relate to this, maxing out credit cards, mortgaging the family home, and all of these things that you need to do just to kind of get started. But then once you kind of get past that initial point, what options are available to you? Well documented that, Australian banks aren't really set up to lend to businesses at, commercially agreeable rates, and alternative finance has emerged. But equity capital has just been this piece that has not been possible for businesses until now. And what I'm talking about is making a regulated offer of securities and inviting people to become shareholders in your business.
So I imagine we could get very geeky here, and I'm no financial lending geek. I know you are, but let's try and keep this simple. Is it as simple as a business owner goes to a website, in this case, say Birchal's, and creates a campaign and says, hey, listen, in exchange for this amount of equity, we will do this. We will aim to do this for you and grow your money like that. Is it sort of that simple? I mean, there's a lot of complication behind that, I'm sure.
No, at a high level, that's exactly what it is.
Right.
There's obviously a lot more detail that kind of sits underneath that. And what we've done is simplified the process as much as possible to allow companies to make essentially a regulated offer of securities, which traditionally was only the domain of ASX-listed companies and the like, big public companies. But what the government's done is remove the regulation and red tape and allowed small businesses to make these public offers. And that's what Birchal's really good at, is taking what has traditionally been a really expensive and complicated process and enabling companies to do this easily and in a way that they can invite, their most passionate customers and fans into their business.
Well, that's interesting. I'll have a chat. I want to talk to you about the marketing of Birchal later, but turning a complicated offer into a simple offer is no mean feat. So I'll be interested to know how you did that. But just back on the equity crowdfunding thing, because at the end of the day, this podcast is about marketing, and I'm here to help small business owners grow through smart marketing. Now, this is a conversation beyond marketing, but what are the types of things a small business could use equity crowdfunding to do? Can they say, hey, listen, I need $1 million for a marketing campaign, as much as they can say I need $1 million for plant and equipment? Can it be for anything?
Look, almost anything. So
can't be for a new car for the CEO. I get that.
Yeah, well, actually, I mean, funnily enough, there's probably one of the things that, like, provided that it's in line with your business plans, like that would be fine. But I mean, you need to kind of convince shareholders that,
yes,
that it's a viable strategy. Look, there are some limitations, right? You can't raise money to invest in other entities or schemes. It's got to go into your business and your plans to grow the business. And it's pretty tricky to use it to retire debt as well. So, like, sometimes founders will come to us and, quite understandably, they've advanced money to the business over time and kind of recognized it in their account as a loan. That's not what this is for. This is for issuing new shares, and the incoming investors are really funding this growth opportunity, whatever it is that the company is embarking on. And look, some of these activities are capital intensive. Let's just go with a brewery as an example. Like, if you're buying equipment, expensive kit, you need to find that money somewhere. Equity crowdfunding is a good way of doing that. But your example about marketing, absolutely. We've had, some businesses that they're established, they're operational, they're, generating positive cash flow, but they know that if they had more budget, they could accelerate their growth. That's an entirely credible proposition to raise funds for.
Describe the profile of a typical equity crowdfunder, a typical business owner, because it is relatively new. It feels very geeky. It feels very tech. and it doesn't feel like your local accountant or chiropractor is necessarily going to know about it or be excited about it because of those reasons.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've covered a really diverse range of industries. So, there were some preconceived notions of which industries and which types of opportunities would be possible with crowdfunding. And what we've shown over the early few years of this regime in Australia is it's actually quite diverse. A lot of, different businesses of different stages are using crowdfunding. The outcomes or what they can achieve is probably dependent on, what stage they're at and what industry they're in. But the consistent theme really is, do they have a story to tell? Does it appeal to a wide audience? And can we find, this audience of people that will be drawn in to support their vision? A B2C business like a craft brewer, it's a perfect example, and your mind already goes there and you can kind of see it's an exciting business and people would want to be involved in. But we've hosted offers for businesses that don't have a product or service to an end consumer, but they're operating in a space or pursuing a mission or an objective that people care about and we can build an audience for. And that's probably the primary factor for success. Like, who cares about what you are doing and how can you bring them into your business?
So that's interesting because that's where marketing plays a massive role, I imagine, in a successful crowdfunding campaign. Because if we look at someone like Dan Norris, now Dan was on this podcast 3 episodes ago and he explained not only the marketing behind Black Hops Brewery, but how he went about that crowdfunding campaign with you guys. Now, the marketing that Dan was doing anyway, putting aside whether he was going to do an equity crowdfund or not, was really laser focused on building community. Dan's a weapon at building community. Yeah, it's craft beer. It's a friendly kind of space anyway. And, he's got tap rooms. And so he had a real head start, I suppose, in that he's just got this community of ambassadors and raving fans who he could immediately go, hey, listen, I've just launched a campaign that I'm going to give you a share in the business if you give us some dough. Yeah? And so that's kind of relatively easy for Dan. He did the hard work. What about businesses that haven't done that hard work, that don't necessarily have a tribe of raving fans that they can access because they don't have a list or don't have a strong social presence? Can they still succeed in equity crowdfunding?
Look, they can, and we've certainly hosted offers for businesses that are, still like fairly early on in their journey and don't have a big audience. But I mean, even if you consider Black Hops, like they had to start somewhere. And You're right, like Dan, he's a weapon, he's a pioneer, and he just gets this. But more and more businesses are kind of starting to realize this as well. And I don't want to get too kind of philosophical about this, but like there are some major benefits for society and the economy more broadly if we're broadening the range of stakeholders that companies involve in their business and that they're thinking about when they're making decisions. And
Sure.
Certainly what we've observed is businesses increasingly are either committing to pursue an ethical or sustainable objective directly or indirectly just by committing to operate in an ethical or sustainable way. And community is really, central to all of that. Now, that's not appropriate for every business, but the ones that it is appropriate for, like there are massive advantages, and they're also the ones that are supremely positioned to do well with crowdfunding.
Yeah, I can see the philosophical side of this, where it is good for the community. It brings people together, is an opportunity for the little guy to take a lick in a big or in a business that he or she would never have imagined. I guess with interest rates as low as they are, money in the bank's hopeless. The share market's fairly volatile, probably going to get more volatile. We're being trained as humans, thanks to crypto, that there are other places to put our money, albeit the risk profile tends to increase exponentially as we start to talk about those things. But maybe that's coming down. What's the typical profile then, Matt, of a equity crowdfunding investor? Is it a mum and dad? Are they putting in $1,000? Who are these people?
Again, it's similarly diverse. It is a really broad cross-section, and the audiences typically mirror the opportunities that they're funding. So that's what we do. That's how we approach these campaigns. In the past, you would go to an investment bank or a corporate advisor that would cultivate a list of investors and then charge companies for access to that list. But because companies can now advertise their opportunities to a national audience, We build audiences for a company, and that just means that we're opening up this as an asset class for investment for more and more Australians, which can only be a good thing. As you know, you've mentioned like cryptocurrency and the rise of the retail investor and people taking a more active interest in building wealth. They're all great things because they're increasing people's appetite for risk, but that needs to be kind of tempered with the inherent risks in an asset class. I would say, crypto, inherently speculative, doesn't really contribute, as much to the economy when you consider investing in a startup. Startups are usually raising money to hire people, build things, and this is just, the benefits kind of compound. So it's a really fulfilling space to be in. But most people thought at the outset that this would just be like retail investors or mum and dads, like as you mentioned. What we've seen, and not that surprisingly because we've observed markets overseas similar to what we do, is professional investors are increasingly investing through crowdfunding platforms because they're realizing it's a great way to get access to this deal flow that in the past they would need to go to events, have coffees with people, and, a lot of this relationship starting in the offline world. In the UK, half of all of the money that's invested through crowdfunding platforms comes from professional investors, and that's
when you say professional investor, what is that? Is that a financial planner? Is that a fund? Is that of some sort? All of the above?
Yeah, look, all of the above. And the research has come out from Cambridge University. They publish a lot of really good data on alternative finance over in the UK, which is really useful. But when they talk about professional investors, some of them are at the larger end, investment banks and VC funds, but others are just angel investors. And, these are people that invest not in significant amounts of money, but less than what VCs and larger institutional investors do. But as a hobby or as a profession, just seeing these opportunities and backing them.
That's good for the likes of Birchal. If a big professional or institutional investor comes in and, knocks out 70% of an offering, but then doesn't that kind of defeat the purpose for the mum and dad investors who are, thinking they're surrounded by other mum and dad investors? How does that work? There is a limit, isn't there? Did I read somewhere where there was a $10,000 limit or something on your investment?
Yeah, that's right. So retail investors are limited to $10,000 per company per year.
Uh-huh.
And the most that a company can raise is $5 million within a 12-month period.
Okay.
But just to, your example, I suppose, I can kind of cite a couple of recent examples from last year, but Thrive, which is rebranded their Thriday now, it's a small business banking product. They raised $3 million in 3 days. Half of that came from, professional type investors, and the other half came from people that were just, interested in the opportunity. I wouldn't say that kind of, disenfranchises these smaller investors. I think on the contrary, right? Like they were able to get access to this opportunity that in the past would have just been shown to only professional investors. And then similarly with ZeroCo, which is an offer that we hosted in October last year, they raised $5 million in 6.5 hours. And we couldn't fit any more investors into, the round because they hit their statutory maximum. But Square Peg, one of the most well-regarded VC investors in the country, invested $6 million on substantially the same terms in the same round. So a really kind of pivotal moment in Australia because for the first time, retail investors were able to invest alongside, one of the most successful investors in the country.
Well, I suppose it gives you, if I'm in that, let's say I'm a mum and dad investor in one of those, and then, one of the big guys comes along and takes a big slice, and I'm going, I think I might have made the right decision there.
I think that's right.
They think it's good and they're doing all the research. I'm just putting a finger in the air going, that looks like a good idea. I'll give them $1,000. So I kind of get it. It works both ways. We worked through Black Hop's equity crowdfunding campaign with Dan the other day. Not in great detail, Matt, but can we maybe do a bit of it won't be a role play, but like if let's say there is someone listening who owns a building company and they're thinking they want to take it to the next level and maybe open up a regional office. Is that a good example?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, it's about the story and the excitement and being able to draw people in.
Yes.
So, I think I'd probably be asking the question, like, why are you raising money? What does the opportunity look like? And just kind of drilling into something that could appeal to a broad audience of investors.
So, but let's just, I guess what I was saying is, like, let's work through what's the process, not in the minutiae, but if people are listening going, this sounds like a good idea, do they simply go to birchal.com and complete, a series of forms, or, how complicated, how long is this, how expensive is this?
Yeah, great question. I'll step it through for you, and not in all of the minutiae, but look, the first step, you head to birchal.com. We've got a raise investment page, which includes some high-level information about how we go about things in the regime. There's a form to complete. There's an eligibility questionnaire because there are some eligibility requirements for companies to use this. People will be contacted by a campaign manager. So we've got a campaign management team.
Awesome.
And it's important to mention that every company that goes through the process has a dedicated campaign manager who is an expert at this. And our process is 9 to 12 weeks. So the campaign manager is there to guide you through every step of the process, show you what success looks like, and be there to, as a sounding board for things that you're dealing with. There's a lot of ups and downs with a crowd. It's an emotional roller coaster. It really is. And, campaign manager there is to support you through that process.
Well, tell me about the emotion. What do you mean? Why is it an emotional? Because people are giving away a chunk of their precious baby?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, actually making your business presentable for investment can be quite confronting for companies,
This is a classic example when I speak to people, business owners, about entering awards. And in fact, I was a judge of the Telstra Business Awards a few years ago, and I saw this where I'd speak to the applicants and they said, win, lose or draw, the actual process of entering the award, and similarly, obviously, the process of applying to create an equity crowdfunding campaign forces you to look at your business. It forces you to stand in front of a mirror that you may not want to have stood in front of ever.
100%. And that's right. Look, and I know, as an operator of a small business myself, right? It's there are some things, you just kind of get swept.
You just don't want to know about.
Yeah, you kind of get swept up in operational things, and you just, I know I should be focusing on this, but you put it away and busy yourself with the other things that seem more important. So it's a great opportunity to kind of step back and look pretty critically at all parts of your business.
Okay, so keep stepping us through. So you've got this account manager, you say 6 to 9 week process. It's uncovering stuff that you don't want to necessarily uncover, but be bloody good to uncover and do it once and for all. Probably along the way, if I was the business owner going through this, I'd be documenting all the systems and processes that you're taking me through, and probably then doing it to the rest of the business, because that's a smart thing to do.
Yep.
And then we get to a point where we've got the campaign. I imagine the campaign's going to require, like if you were doing a reward-based crowdfunding campaign, you have a video, decent branding, hi, I'm the owner, buy into me, trust me. So you're doing all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. So like at a high level, there's 3 phases. There's the preparation phase. Then there's a pre-offer marketing phase, which is called, it's an expression of interest campaign that runs for like 2 to 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And then the offer itself, that's the third phase. And again, that runs for about 2 to 3 weeks. Then we get into settlements, and I'll kind of explain a little bit about that. That's the important stuff, really, is collecting the money. But
Yeah. Well, I guess the important stuff, the next question is, once you've got that third stage sorted, and obviously you have a link to, I'm going to call it a landing page or the offer page, where you'll find, as a potential investor, you'll find all that information. Dan from Black Hops Brewery, he was ready to go. He had a list. He was probably going to be oversubscribed before he hit the green button. What if you don't have a list? How do people find out about these campaigns? Do you, Birchal, do the marketing of these campaigns for them? Are you hoping that people are just going to Google and searching, I've got $1,000 to invest? Where can I put it? How do people find out about it?
Yeah, so that's what that middle phase is for, that expression of interest campaign. So once we've got the Birchal profile set up, it's that landing page, if you like. We've agreed some marketing assets that goes onto that Birchal profile page. And as you've identified, a campaign video is really critical for that. Now, the campaign video, it's a really great opportunity for you to introduce yourself to people that might be interested in your offer. And look, authenticity is key. Like it's a truism that people back people, right? So they're wanting to understand the story. They're wanting to understand who's behind the business and they want you to kind of draw them into the opportunity that you're going after. And there's some great examples of videos where companies have just absolutely nailed this. But the profile page is just a really high-level summary of your business. It's to start a conversation.
Yes.
Then we get into the expression of interest phase. And this is, pre-offer marketing. We're not including, a lot of details about the offer, specifics, not talking about valuation and typically not how much you're going to raise. Because as I said, it's a slow reveal. We just want to start conversations with people. But when people express interest in an offer, they're telling us what kind of investor they are. Obviously, we have their contact details, but they also importantly tell us how much they would be willing to invest. Now, this is really useful data for us because we've run our 130 plus campaigns all to the same process. So we can give a company really good guidance on how much demand is out there for their offer before they open it. That information is not visible publicly, but it helps the company to structure their offer because every offer needs a minimum target and a maximum target. If you don't pass the minimum target, the offer doesn't proceed, no money changes hands. If you hit the maximum target, we have to close the offer. And we think that's best practice. We think that should be the goal for every company is to sell it out. Because if you've built a surplus of demand, everyone that got in feels really good about it. People that missed out, I feel a little bit bad, but they'll be interested in the next opportunity. So that's what we want to set companies up for. Now, during that EOI phase, a company's also working on the legal and compliance obligations that they need to make an offer. Every offer needs a regulated disclosure document. So it's like a prospectus, but it's a cut down version and very achievable for most companies to prepare. That document is shared with a selection of these interested investors before the offer opens, because once we open it, we can't change anything. And these investors are a really valuable source of feedback so the companies can kind of fine tune the final details of their offer, like their valuation and how they've presented the opportunity and these things. Then we get to opening the offer. And ideally, the investors that you've been in close contact with through that EOI process will come in on day one. That's that early traction, that social proof that really puts you in a good position to leverage that early support and get further investment.
And I imagine Birchal is saying, hey, at this point, it's 17% full and, so giving that sort of that sense of either scarcity or not scarcity really, but getting people to start to take action. There's probably not a simple answer to this, Matt, but how many investors does a typical equity crowdfunding campaign result in?
Yeah, look, the average is about 450 to 500 at the moment.
You know my next question then, don't you?
Average amount?
No. Why would a business owner want so many micro investors versus just one that they might have done, done the work on and gone, that investor over there shares the same values as I do. We get along at a personality level. It's good. That's one person I need to deal with. Instead of 450, a percentage of which are going to be knocking on my door going, where's my money? What's happening? Are we winning? Are we losing?
Yep.
What date am I going to get the payment?
It's a great question. And it's one that comes up all the time. And I'm not going to
No doubt.
I'm not going to sit here and say that, crowdfunding is appropriate for every business and it's a panacea for all ills. But, there are advantages and disadvantages with having lots of people involved in your business. What most businesses that we deal with, though, reconcile that the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. If companies can't get there, because inviting a large number of people into your business can be quite confronting. It requires you to be transparent and accountable. And the companies that get the most out of this really lean into that. And, Dan's a great example, like their business has been built around community. If a company can't get there, then this is probably not right for them because, their chances of success, not only in completing a successful offer, but actually getting the most out of this relationship with your, large group of investors later on, unlikely. So like you really do need to lean into this.
So just playing that through then. So a business closes their successful equity crowdfunding campaign with 450 mum and dad investors who have all put in under 10 grand each.
Yep.
At that point, I'm assuming there's a point comes where Birchal no longer play a role, and now that business owner is responsible for the 450 investors.
Yep.
What's best practice there? Because the last thing they want is their receptionist taking phone calls, if they do have a receptionist.
Yep.
So from, every day from someone asking a question, is best practice to set up a separate website, run a monthly webinar, update webinar? Tell us.
Yeah, and look, it's a great question, and we've, as I mentioned, we've hosted over 130 offers, so we've seen a variety of different approaches that companies have taken to, managing their shareholders. I think what I'd say at the outset, a company really should set expectations, including their cadence of communication with companies.
Yeah.
So like some companies do report monthly, and they're good reports. They'll kind of send emails out, and they're informal reports that they'll send to shareholders. To deal with the regulatory stuff, like there's an annual report that you need to produce and lodge with ASIC. And we would say that's a pretty kind of low bar, right? That companies really should be doing more than that. Mm-hmm. But that's the requirement. That's the legal requirement, is to produce an annual report. Some companies report monthly, others report quarterly. We've had some companies that have, prior to actually settling the offer and issuing people shares, they've given people a final reminder and said, this is how we're going to communicate with you. We are not going to be available, daily to, answer questions about the company. And so if you've got second thoughts about this, we're going to give you another 7 days to change your mind. And they did.
Huh.
And I think that, that's the key, is just understanding what's achievable for you, communicating that clearly with your audience, and then just sticking to it.
It's all about setting expectations.
Yep.
Pretty clear there. The most successful equity crowdfunding campaign for Birchal since you've been up and running? What is it? It sounds like the one that was, what is it, $5 million in 6.5 hours.
Yeah, so that's for ZeroCo. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this business, but like they're on a mission to untrash the planet by, basically removing single-use plastics around the home. Like you think about all of the cleaning products and all the plastics that people use. This is a system for, reusable plastic bottles that you refill with pouches that are recyclable and cleaned and so on. They have had 45,000 customers when they came to us. And, when you think about what people are doing, they're, committing to run their home in a different way. So they can be quite evangelical about this. And
totally,
really,
they're already sold. There's talk about an emotional space. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. So like they are the most successful campaign in terms of, the time that it took them to close the offer and the amount raised. Probably the second most was a company called Montu. So they've completed 2 campaigns. One raised $2 million. Their follow-on campaign raised $3.5 million. And they're a medicinal cannabis company. They've set up a framework for doctors to make it easier for doctors to prescribe medicinal cannabis for people with ailments.
Yeah, okay. Well, both those categories or industries are very emotional and very much in the news right now. That's that's one side of success, which is, raise a whole lot of dough in a short amount of time. What about the actual success for the investors? Well, ZeroCo and the other one. What kind of returns were given?
So, look, I mean, it's still fairly early days for both of those companies. ZeroCo, as I mentioned, they received the investment from Square Peg, $6 million. VC investors invest on a longer horizon, but expectations that, the companies will appreciate significantly in value over time. For Montu, between their 2 crowdfunding raises, I think it was, almost double the valuation from the first to the second. So certainly the investors that got in on the first round have realised a paper gain, if you like. But we have had a couple of exits, and it is still really early for the industry in Australia. Probably the most significant one was a company called Activated Nutrients. They became the first company to raise funds through crowdfunding that is now listed on the ASX.
Oh, wow.
So, Yeah, we helped them raise back in 2019 at a pre-money valuation of $6 million, and they IPO'd on ASX, oversubscribed, $8 million round. I think the IPO price was about $40 million. So, very kind of tidy return.
Yeah, off to the races. Now, let's talk about Birchal. That is your business in terms of how it came about and how you go about marketing something that is complicated, not understood, and has low awareness. But first, what's with the name Birchal? Birchal.
The .com was available is the short answer.
I love it.
And look, we decided not to, put in our name crowd or fund or like things that people would ordinarily kind of, imagine or be descriptive with our name. We decided to choose something that was like, essentially meaningless before we launched, so we could project our own image onto it.
Nice.
And it's a strategy that's worked for us, which is great.
I like it. Educating mum and dad investors about crowdfunding, raising awareness, developing trust, all that kind of stuff. You're an industry leader in Australia. Are you taking on the job of both educating the wider world about it and promoting your brand Birchal as well? And if you are, how are you doing that?
Oh, look, we absolutely are, and this is an ongoing challenge for us. And grateful for people like you, Tim, for helping us to kind of get out there and spread the word. I'm blown away. The people that we come across that still haven't heard about what we do.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, you're too close to it.
Yeah, I know. But it's frustrating and exciting at the same time, right? Frustrating because it's like, we're trying to make so much noise here and tell everyone. But exciting because it just highlights the scale of the opportunity for us. But, this is something that is really tricky for us because, reward crowdfunding has been around a while.
Yeah.
So people have preconceived notions of that. We need to kind of, unwind some of these things when we're getting into it. In terms of what's worked for us, it's just doing and having like real case studies. Like we tried to get out there and talk about crowdfunding, but we found that all we were doing was just talking about ourselves, and we're not the story. Our clients are the story. So
that's right.
We shifted our strategy entirely, and we don't do a lot of marketing, but very little marketing of Birchal ourselves, other than outreach and things like this. But we put all our efforts on achieving great outcomes for our clients. And it's just had this added, multiplier effect because someone has a great experience with crowdfunding. That's awesome. But then they'll go and tell their friends, or because they're public campaigns, people will just reach out and ask them, So we'll chat with a business, comes to see us, and they're like, I've already spoken to 4 or 5 people that have been through the process before.
So it's very organic. You're not trying to build an empire overnight. You are making sure it sounds like, and that, the old saying, best marketing is a great product. So you're working very hard at making sure the campaigns and clients that you have are amazing and get amazing results, and then organically someone tells someone else and it grows that way, right? As opposed to putting any great effort into, well, you could be putting a lot of effort into, say, creating helpful content, whether it be a YouTube channel or a podcast or a blog series or a series of ebooks that actually, and I know, Bonjoro, which is a discussion, an app that helps you do these personalised videos. I spoke to the owner a couple of years ago. They do these great sort of case studies of, that's their content marketing strategy of case studies, but you're kind of you've decided not to do that and going down a path of organic attraction.
It's not to say never, but I suppose the commitment of really focusing on great outcomes for clients means that that's the primary focus. So like we have kind of tried content marketing and a few of these things from time to time, and we do release industry publications which are really useful as well. But as a small and growing business in a really, high growth space, that, our main priority is just, kind of servicing our clients. So it's a pain that I imagine is felt by a lot of your audience as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So working strategically
100%.
and operationally.
How do you make money, Matt?
So Birchal's business model is pretty simple. We charge $900 for that expression of interest campaign that I mentioned. There's no obligation for a company to proceed to the offer. So we go through the pre-offer marketing phase, and in most cases, there's enough interest for a company to proceed. But if not, they don't need to proceed further. When we get to publishing the offer, it's $1,900 for us to review and publish the offer document. So we have a quasi-regulatory role to perform. ASIC doesn't review these documents. That's our role as the intermediary. So there's, some work that we need to do to make sure that everything's kind of above board in that respect. And then if the offer is successful, we charge 6% of the total approved investments.
Oh, okay. Well, there's your money. That's your way home. It's not out of the 900 and the 1900, but the 6% is pretty handy. That's awesome, mate.
Yep.
I imagine it's something that's who's leading this? Is it America, UK, some European country? Who's leading equity crowdfunding?
Yeah, look, the UK were really the pioneers for this, and it grew in the wake of the GFC. So the equity crowdfunding industry over there is about 10 years, a bit over 10 years old.
Yep.
But like that industry, I describe it as mature, but in an economic sense, it is not. Like it's still growing about 20% year on year. The States was probably a little bit later to the party, but they're accelerating at about 100% year on year. There's three big platforms over there. And then, like little old Australia, we're kind of we were pretty late to the party because there was some.
That's all right, mate. We're punching above our weight.
Yeah. But fundamental changes to corporate law that needed to happen to allow us to do what we do. But it's accelerating really quickly. And, through COVID, when, investors were capitulating and other sources of finance kind of dried up during that early phase, we were able to still deliver capital to businesses, and it was really fulfilling work, during that time, and great that we've got this now.
That's awesome. Hey, Matt Vitale, Birchal.com is where you'll find him. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing those insights to something, like I said at the start, a new idea that, maybe many of us didn't know about beforehand. You can contact Matt via Birchal.com. If you decide to do a crowdfunding campaign, tell him Timbo sent you, and he'll shout you a lunch at a very expensive 5-star restaurant. Thank you so much. No, that's not true. That's not true.
It'll be my pleasure, Timbo.
Good on you, Matt. Thank you, buddy. Well, there you go, team. Equity crowdfunding specialist Matt Vitale of Birchal. I think the fellow knows what he's doing. I do love bringing new ideas to you guys. Did you find that interesting? Did you benefit from it? Is it something you may act upon? If you do act upon it, if you do end up running a campaign on Birchal, please let me know and I'll share it in an upcoming episode. I'd love to see you benefit from it. Hey, if you head over to smallbusinessbigmarketing.com/588, you will find any links and resources we did mention in that chat. I would love to know what grabbed your attention from that chat with Matt. Call the Small Business Big Marketing hotline on 0480 015 150 and let me know, or simply share a marketing idea that's working for you, or maybe you've got an idea, that'll improve this show. That wouldn't be hard. Anyway, long-time listener Daryl Van Roy did just that.
G'day, Timbo. Daryl Van Roy from Sunbury in Victoria, mate. As you know, long-time listener. Former booker of your speaking services too, as you no doubt recall from a couple of years ago. You just said no one's ringing, so I thought I'd give you a ring and just remind you that probably the single biggest takeaway I have from your podcast is what you keep saying, is that people buy from people. And my story I have on my website and that of what I support, my donations, seems to get me very positive feedback from my customers. So, and the other thing about people buying from people and people associating with people and relationships and all that sort of stuff, I do recall going back years ago, it was you and me and about half a dozen others met at some pub in Hawthorne or Surrey's Hills or somewhere in Melbourne for a few drinks one night. Probably should do that again one day, mate. So next time you're in Melbourne, give us a bell and we'll catch up just for, we'll talk about how good Essendon is over Hawthorne perhaps.
Hey, Daryl, thank you so much for taking the time, buddy, to ring the Small Business Big Marketing hotline. It'll be a pretty quick conversation around the footy. Clearly Hawthorne, by a very, very, very long stretch. The pub catch-up idea, they were good. I didn't do too many of them. They were back in the early days. Did a couple of meetups in Melbourne and Sydney. It is a good idea. I'll whack it in the good idea book and get around to it at some point. Maybe a meetup in Melbourne or one up here on the Sunshine Coast or next time I'm in Sydney. I don't know. When I start travelling again, it'll be a good idea. And thank you, Daryl, for booking me all those years ago. For those of you who don't know, I do keynote speaking and emceeing. timreid.com.au is my speaker's website, timreid.com.au. Everyone else, give the hotline a buzz, 0480 015 150. Alrighty, that almost brings us to the end of today's episode. If you enjoyed it, please hit the subscribe button on your favourite podcast app. If you're up for it, I'd be very happy for you to hit the stop button now and leave a review on Apple Podcast or Google Play. I'd really appreciate that. If you're ready to create some helpful marketing, then grab a copy of my book, The Boomerang Effect, over at my new website, smallbusinessbigmarketing.com. As has been the case for the past 12 years, it's been me, Timbo Reid, trying to figure out this marketing caper on your behalf. Hammond organ aficionado Lockie Doley wrote, sang, played and recorded the awesome intro that you hear week in, week out. And a big thanks to producer Romy Sher. Thanks for tuning in. May your marketing be the absolute best marketing. Bye for now.